Tell us what you think. In person, over the phone, online. Watch and hear yourself on TV. You tell us, we air it. This is The Local Live.
Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to The Local Live. I'm Anthony Carlo.
And I'm Kat Galliano. We're the only news show in the area that brings you weekly updates on the stories happening around you.
So let's take a look at the news we have for you tonight.
Later in our roundtable discussion, we'll talk about infidelity in relationships. Stay tuned.
Last night, Rob Astorino made his State of the County. We have the highlights.
Prizes for students in the Mamaroneck School District. More coming up.
Did you know that water rates will increase in the village of Larchmont?
And for our sports fan, this week's LMC TV Varsity Sports Play of the Week.
Finally, let's help our pet of the week find a new family.
Yesterday, April 22nd, Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino delivered the State of the County speech at the County Court in White Plains. His speech featured highlights of Westchester County and strides he made over the last 5 years.
Astorino talked about the use of technology as a resource to reach the public using the new Westchester smartphone mobile apps. He also shared his excitement about the launching of a new compositing site in Valhalla opening in June. The county executive also highlighted the continuation to expand on the $1 billion capital projects brought to the county and the opening of the Westchester Economic Development Office in Manhattan.
Is to aggressively promote Westchester's many assets, offerings, and competitive advantages to companies and entrepreneurs looking to relocate, expand, or to start.
Other key points Astorino mentioned is the deal to keep and revitalize Rye Playland. Let's take a listen.
And as early as 2016, visitors could start seeing the upgrades to the park's overall appearance, a broader selection of food and dining choices, new rides, including coasters, slides, and a mini water park.
Ending his speech, the county executive continued his promise to the residents to not raise the county tax.
Our taxes are still too damn high, and a tax increase is the last thing Westchester County needs. So you have my pledge that I will submit a budget to the Board of Legislators in the fall that will not raise the county tax levy.
Must have been music to their ears to hear that. Now happening in our community, Mamaroneck High School seniors took top honors at the state business competition in Rochester. This is the second year in a row that the school's Future Business Leaders of America team has medaled. Let's hear more from the school officials at the latest Mamaroneck School Board meeting.
Federal Reserve Bank of New York has selected our Mamaroneck High School student team as a semifinalist in its high school economics competition, the Fed Challenge. This multi-level competition is designed to bring real-world economics into the classroom. Teams play the role of monetary policymakers by analyzing economic conditions and recommending a course of monetary policy to a panel of judges that includes New York Fed economists and other experts. The Mamaroneck High School team consisted of Noah Putnam, Sam Wertheim, Josh Gursky, Sophie Despins, and Andrew Sommer, who presented their views on the current state of the economy, future expectations, and interest rate guidance. MHS competed against about 100 other high school teams all over New York, northern New Jersey, and Fairfield County, and was among 20 teams moving on to the semifinals. Very impressive. For the second year in a row, Mamaroneck High School.
Next week, Mamaroneck Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Shaps, will be on our show to discuss the school budget. You can send your questions or comments for him to the local live at lmctv.org.
One of the public hearings at Monday's gathering of the Larchmont trustees was on an improved increase of the village's water rates, specifically the fixed charge and the water consumption rates.
These increases are to cover the cost of improving water monitoring and to plug leaks that add to water costs in the village.
And then I'd like to have a motion that we pass the recommended increases of the water service charge, that's the fixed charge, by 40%, and to increase the increase in water consumption rate to by 7.5%. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 The ayes.
In other news from the meeting, the Larchmont Village Treasurer presented the 2015-16 budget, which was unanimously approved that evening.
Treasurer Dennis Brucani said that the tax levy grew by almost 2% from last year. That's over $260,000. The treasurer also said that the 2% tax levy legislation allowed the Village of Larchmont to grow their budget by over $270,000, with about $4,000 remaining for the next fiscal year. And now for our highlights of what's trending in our online newspapers. Here's this week's In the Media.
The Journal News reports two stories that caught my eye this week. A team of Mamaroneck Tigers placed in 3 out of 4 categories in a competition among local high school and college students. They tried to develop mobile apps for Alzheimer's treatment. It was called Westchester Smart Mobile App Development. 27 teams had their apps judged at Pace University. You can read the Journal News for more. And then there was news that the Westchester Land Trust has taken over the 35-acre Otter Creek Preserve in Mamaroneck Village. It's the largest privately owned tidal wetland. It was designated and protected as a nature sanctuary in Westchester. The preserve runs along Taylor's Lane off Boston Post Road, a 3-mile stretch of coastline on Long Island Sound. Read the Journal News to learn what this means for the future of Otter Creek. From the Mamaroneck Daily Voice, Sean and Chris Murphy, better known as Murphy Brothers Construction, hosted a topping out ceremony to celebrate the last structural beam being installed on the Mamaroneck self-storage and the halfway point in the construction of the 40,000 square foot building on Center Avenue just off Fenimore Road. The new building is a green construction project, the first commercial project in the tri-state area to feature solar roof shingles. The rental office is already open for business. The Voice has more. This month's Larchmont Ledger is packed with news items, including the Sea Breeze House Tour. Sunday, April 26th, you can visit extraordinary homes in Larchmont Manor featuring water views. It's a fundraiser for the Larchmont Historical Society. Tickets are limited, but they may still be available. You can ask at the Flower Bar, 11 Addison Street in Larchmont. April is National Poetry Month, and The Patch has news about an open mic night on Friday, April 24th. It's for teens and adults. You're invited to the Voracious Reader Bookstore on Palmer Avenue. You can listen to poetry, maybe bring a poem of your own to read aloud. It starts at 7. And last, learn what to do in a weather emergency or other disaster. The Loop Notes, a training program, the New York State Citizens Preparedness Corps, on April 28th at Rhinebeck High School. It's hosted by the PTSA. It starts at 6:30 in the school's Performing Arts Center. Now you've got to register in advance. Check out the Loop for details. Reporting for In the Media, I'm Mike Witch.
Thank you, Mike. We'll be back in just a moment with our discussion on infidelity.
Who's more likely to be unfaithful in a relationship, a man or a woman? We're going to find out with our roundtable on infidelity. I'm Maura Carlin, joined by Mike Witch.
And as always, we want to hear from you, your comments and questions by phone, email, or Twitter. The contact information is on the screen, and I'll be monitoring it during the show.
And we really do want to hear what you folks have to say about cheating. Joining us is licensed marriage and family therapist Tori Aletto. So, Tori,
yes.
Men or women, who's more likely to cheat?
Well, men, but not by much. So, according to the most recent Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy, 21% of men admitted to a physical affair, while 15% of women admitted. So it's not too far away from each other.
Have those numbers changed over time?
They have. They certainly have. And what's interesting too is the emotional affair is now being calculated, which is sort of a newer thing.
Okay.
which rises to 41% of people admitting an affair. So now the emotional aspect is also tied in.
Okay.
We actually have an email already from a
Already?
viewer. Yep.
Okay.
May I ask this question?
Sure.
She says, are there stages for cheating or being faithful, excuse me?
Yes, I would say there are. I think the initial stage would maybe be attraction, and which kind of can feed into lust. That's the beginning part. I think another stage would be romantic love, which is the next escalating aspect, which includes more of the emotional part of an affair. So there are certainly stages, almost as a regular relationship would have stages.
Do men and women cheat for the same reasons?
That's a really good question. I think so. That's a loaded question, but I'll answer it in this way. I think it's always been, the stereotype has been that men cheat more for physical reasons, women cheat for more emotional reasons, and I don't think that's necessarily true anymore.
Why is that?
I think what we're starting to realize is a lot of it has to do with connection. So people are trying to get their needs met outside of their relationship. And a lot of the time, men feel comfortable expressing themselves and feeling connected in a physical way. So we're seeing that not only is it the sexual and physical aspect of it, but it's also it's much more deeper than I think we've ever given credit for in terms of the physical aspect on the male side. So
So there's an emotional component to the physical side, is what you're saying.
Yes, generally, yes.
Does it matter whether the couple is married or not? Does that make one more or less likely to cheat, as opposed to a long-term relationship without marriage?
Sure. I think it does in terms of just how people feel about it. I think it does in terms of the numbers. Generally, it lessens when there's a marriage involved.
It is less.
It is less. Yes.
Okay.
Does that apply also to same-sex couples?
I was just going to ask that.
Have you seen that in your practice?
That's a really good question. You do see that. It certainly does apply. I don't know if the numbers apply, and they don't get as specific as to that. They kind of just separate it men and women. So I'm not entirely sure, but it's certainly a huge issue, I think, in any relationship.
And how honest do you think people are in these polls? Like, because it's based on admitting to doing it.
Yes, exactly. So you have to almost assume that the numbers are a bit higher because, I would assume.
Okay,
yeah.
that's sort of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Which is worse for a relationship, the physical or the emotional cheating?
You know, that varies between person and person. I think the emotional aspect adds another layer to it. If you're in a romantic love stage with someone, I think there's more to it than just the less physical aspect of it. So I would say the emotional end of it extends the relationship more, and it's probably more difficult.
So is it more of a duration thing? You know, if it's just an instance of sex as opposed to an ongoing relationship.
Right. Yeah, it can be time. It can be just how far the relationship goes, how quickly. Sometimes emotional relationships develop much quicker than we may anticipate. Especially, one of the more common areas of cheating happens at work.
Well, that was actually something I was going to ask you about.
Yes.
Should you worry about exes or coworkers?
Yeah.
And if you want to break it down, we can do coworkers first.
Yeah. Well, at work is the most common area where people cheat, whether it's business trips or it's at work with people that you kind of get to know, which I think is very interesting because I think there's a connection factor to that. If the bar or wherever else was the main place, then you would say, oh, people are going out looking to kind of cheat. But I think that people are kind of growing connections, feeling heard, getting kind of things that they're not feeling like they're getting in their marriage or relationship, and all of a sudden a relationship comes from that, physical or emotional.
Is that the same or different as having the proverbial office spouse? If you know what I'm talking about, somebody who is like your spouse, but at the office, and it can be completely innocent.
Yeah, I think that's different.
Okay.
I think it's different. I think you have to have pretty serious, intimate relationships with people that you work with, but I think that there's a line there, and I think it's when you cross it in terms of what you're actually getting met, from those relationships. So if you're like meeting after work, if you're having really intimate conversations, if there's obviously anything physical going on, that's kind of crossing the line, I think.
You're a young therapist.
I am.
Do you see unfaithfulness at different stages of youth? Is it more prominent among older couples, let's say?
I think it's pretty prominent, young or old couples. I think even in terms of just being together versus living together versus marriage versus being married for 20 years, I think it's a really common issue. Depending on whatever age range that I'm seeing, it's a huge problem. I'd say it's probably 70% there's an affair attached to something going on within all the clients that I see or do see. So it's a huge thing.
In terms of people who are having trouble in their relationship, there's
Yes.
75% of the time.
I would say that's a topic that's brought into the room, whether it's just an attraction or it's they found out someone was cheating on them. Whatever it is, there's an affair that's very commonly or an attraction. I don't want to say always an affair, but there's always something or someone else that's brought into the room. So that it's a huge thing.
Is there really a 7-year itch? Is that a time period where someone's more likely to cheat?
They say there is. I think that what happens is, you get engaged, get married, you have your first kid, you have your second kid if you do, you have your third if you do, and then all of a sudden you kind of get back to this like status quo state with your spouse. So I think that 7 years is a nice time frame that kind of probably encompasses all those really challenging stages that kind of take up a lot of emotions, time, energy, and then all of a sudden, kids are in school, people are back to their flow, and then you have your spouse, you have the relationship there, and I think that's when things start to kind of really show.
Interesting.
Again.
We have an email. May I ask it?
Okay, can I just?
Go ahead.
I just want to finish. Are there other points in a relationship or in one's life where you're more vulnerable or it's more likely to have a cheating time frame?
Yeah, I think when your kids start to go to school, I think is one. I think also the college time frame when your kids are out of the house.
So the empty nester.
Empty nester. That's also, kind of start to reevaluate your needs as an individual.
Do I want to stay with this person for the rest of my life?
Yeah, and you also notice too the growth between each of you and where are you at now? Who are you now and what does that look like in the relationship?
And what about even later? I know of people who have gotten divorced, let's say in their 70s, and I've stopped and gone, really?
It's much more unlikely, but it certainly happens. Yeah.
And what causes it at that point?
That's a good question. Usually by the time, I think the age was about 65, if you're together, chances are you'll stay together. But I think, there must be a severe need that's not getting met that at that age, you're figuring it's time to kind of.
Okay. I know you had a question.
Well, we have a viewer who has a very practical question.
Sure.
What should I do if I suspect my partner is cheating, and should cheating ever be forgiven?
We'll answer them in separate parts. I think if you are suspecting something, I think it's something that needs to be talked about. So we talk about that kind of gut intuition feeling, which usually men or women have. They don't always recognize it. They don't always know what it is. Sometimes they think it's anxiety. Sometimes they think it's something else. But if there's a gut or intuition, I think it's time to at least address whatever it is you're feeling, whatever it is you're thinking, and also kind of try to get to the bottom of what it is.
Is that gut usually right?
It depends. I think it's hinting at something. It's hinting at some sort of aspect of relationship, something that doesn't feel right. So I think it's hinting at a dysfunction that you need to pay attention to. Whether or not that's always an affair, it depends on the scenario.
Now, talking about it with your spouse, your partner, or with a therapist like yourself?
That's a good question. It depends if your spouse, what the communication level is like. So I would try to address it with your spouse.
Hon, are you cheating on me?
Well, yeah. I would start more vulnerable than that. I would start to say, I feel something, something doesn't feel right. Are you feeling the same? Kind of start with just where are we at right now? Something doesn't feel right. And if there's something more specific, like you're noticing a pattern of, hiding phone or something that feels, you can maybe address it. But I think a therapist is always a very helpful person to have if you feel that your partner's defensive or not listening to you or not valuing kind of what you're trying to communicate. And
then what about forgiveness?
So forgiveness, is also an individual choice. I think it's certainly something that you can work through if you choose to. I think forgiveness is a big part of that, but I think you have to really work on the trust, and that takes a while.
What percentage of marriages survive infidelity?
31%.
Oh, 31% of those where there's been infidelity.
Where there's been infidelity. Survive. Whatever survive means, I'm not sure. It could be stay married. I don't know, but that's the number.
And people stay married for different reasons, I gather.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, children being a huge factor in that.
Is it easier to cheat if you've cheated before?
I think let me answer it this way. I think cheating is always a symptom of dysfunction in the relationship. So if you are just addressing the cheating and you are not addressing what's happening in the couple's system, then you're going to have somebody who's going to repeatedly kind of leave. So you have to kind of look at both aspects. So if you find out your spouse or your partner has been cheating on you, not only do you have to kind of work through and heal from that and kind of rebuild trust, but you also have to address the underlying challenges between the dynamic, or else you're going to more likely than not have someone who repeats.
So is that where the once a cheater, always a cheater comes from?
I think so. I think people think that you're supposed to heal, trust, and move on. I don't think they realize that something has led to that affair, and that's really what needs the work. It's almost like the affair is kind of showing you that something's happening. It's the symptom of it.
Okay. I had an issue about marriage, some marriage facts that we've seen, and I actually want to thank our production assistant, Vera Lucia Quispe, for some of this information.
Okay.
But I was looking at statistics about marriages that end in divorce, and in this country, 53%. Is that about right? And okay.
It's about right.
But the percentage of arranged marriages where the spouse has been selected by parents, those that end in divorce is only around 3%. Are our parents better at picking our mates for us than we are? Or is there something else going on that we?
Yeah, I think in arranged marriages, you're getting a practical choice with complementary maybe things that you think would be good for your child. I think here, where that's not as common, or we're kind of picking through romance and love, that's where you'll see a higher number. So yeah, I think it's the shift of what the relationship means. So for instance, years ago you partnered with someone to raise a family, and you were two partners. Now we want the partnership, we want communication, we want love, we want lust, we want everything in one, and that's where it becomes much more difficult.
So it's expectations.
I think so. I think it's expectations, but I also think it's the amount of work that it takes to kind of have all of that in your relationship. It's a lot of work. I mean, and we have a lot to do, kids and jobs and everything else in between, to maintain intimacy, to maintain communication. It's a lot of work.
What about the role of children? And do the children cement a relationship, and do they make it less likely that a couple will eventually split if there is some infidelity going on?
I'm not sure it makes it less likely for it to happen. Unfortunately, I think we'd want to think that way, but I think it's the dynamics in the relationship that will determine that. And sometimes kids can stress those dynamics, so it depends. But I think people genuinely want to try to stay together, especially if they have kids. That's usually, unless it's something that's so terrible that they can't forgive, and that's not an option.
Let's talk about the role of the internet in all of this. Have the numbers changed substantially since we've all gone online?
I wouldn't say substantially, but they've increased. I think that probably exes and old flames, if we had a statistic on that would probably certainly have increased. But
do you think that if you hear from an ex, is that the reason for it?
I think it's just much more easier. I don't know if it's a reason. It's just an easy access. I also think that the aspect of being on the internet and seeing everyone else's perfect relationship, right? And then all of a sudden looking at your own and seeing your, whoever on the couch, and there's a little comparison there. And then all of a sudden an old flame pops up. So it's a little bit of a recipe, I think, for a disaster.
But the internet, does it make it easier to find people and to find people? I mean,
we've got a question right here from a viewer.
There you go.
Who says or asked, does Facebook or the internet help cheating? And this person thinks that Facebook breaks a lot of relationship.
Facebook in particular is brought up, I'd say, in every couple session. I swear.
Really? How?
Doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter. It's always brought up.
In what way?
If somebody is friends with their ex, or friends with someone that they maybe had an attraction to, or messages. I mean, it's a prominent discussion. It's unbelievable, actually. It's brought up a lot.
And is this true in newer and younger relationships, or is it true of older people as well?
It's true of older people as well. Absolutely.
Who don't know how to cover up their
Well,
email paths.
I want to get back to that, but I guess it surprises me. I mean, I will confess I have been found by people in the past, and it hasn't affected my marriage at all.
Right.
But to be fair, I told my husband that so-and-so reached out to me because I didn't think it was fair
Sure.
to do that behind back. But so that really does surprise me.
Yeah. See, I don't know if it necessarily would shift people into cheating more. I just think it makes it more accessible.
But doesn't it also make it easier for people to be caught? I mean, there's such a digital trail that it's easier to find.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that as they're doing it, but it's true. I mean, it's certainly there's a lot more visible aspects to being able to go into a page or see messages, but there's also ways to delete and hide. So it goes both ways.
But there are also a number, I was disturbed to see, websites devoted to helping people have relationships outside their marriage. And I mean, that also was a bit surprising. Are you surprised that such an industry exists?
Unfortunately, with the numbers of how frequent this is, people find businesses to create a demand, or it's supply and demand kind of thing. So
there's clearly the demand.
There is a demand, and I've heard that too. That's actually also a common thing brought up, is that they'll find their partner on a dating site. Well, what does that mean? Are they actually cheating? Is that cheating? What is that exactly about?
Well, is talking to strangers in a chat room or a website, is that cheating?
I would say so. It depends on the content, of course, but I think if there's a sexual nature or even sometimes an emotional nature, depending on what it is, I would say so.
And what about, I guess, cyber sex? I assume that's cheating.
Yes, I mean, again, I would say so too. There are couples that are open and accepting of that. There are, so it kind of varies. But I would say if it's something that you're hiding, then there's probably, something that's a flag, I think.
We just got another email.
Okay.
This question is it possible to be in love with two people?
Yes, actually.
At the same time?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. There's a few different brain systems when it comes to love. There's less romantic love and attachment. So you can feel very attached in one part of your brain to someone, let's say your spouse for 10 years, and feel very lustful over someone. And people get very confused by that. But it actually is different systems in your brain. So absolutely you can feel that you're in love with two people at once.
I want to come back.
That creates a lot of conflict, though.
That creates a lot of conflict. The thing is, again, what it really is doing, though, is it's highlighting an issue. So maybe let's say, your intimacy or your sexual life with your partner hasn't been happening. That's it just more so highlights an area that you would want to hopefully work on with your partner.
Yeah, more.
Okay, well, I've lost my train of thought. That's okay. But
well, we're almost out of time.
We are out of time. I've been getting the wrap-up sign.
Okay.
So thank you, Tori Leto, for coming in and talking about infidelity with us.
Yes.
And to you for joining us.
Yes, I want to thank our guest as well. And next week, the Mamaroneck School Superintendent will be here to talk about that school district's budget. Right now, stay tuned. We'll be back with more community stories in a moment.
This week in sports, Rhinebeck softball pitcher Diana King dominated in a game against Hastings, allowing only one hit, striking out 14 and adding a home run for good measure. Let's take a look at the big day from the Panthers senior, the first ever LMC Varsity Sports Player of the Week.
See if King goes with something off speed 0-2. Nope, it's the heat, strike 3.
You can really be very effective.
Finkelstein late on that heater, strike 3. The 1-2. There's strike 3. So King does strike out the side.
I feel great. I mean, I've been working so hard on the off season. I think I have better control, so I think that's a big help. But my team's really great, and they're supporting me in the field. So.
Swing and a miss, way out in front, went with the changeup.
Wow, what a deadly pitch from Diana King to finish off that inning, Rob.
The immaculate inning, 9 pitches, 3 strikeouts. Have a seat. The 1-2. Swing and a miss, strike 3. Count 0-2. And there's strike 3.
Plan to swing to that spot. And if it's there, then you'll be able to get your bat on the ball, and if not,
that happens.
That happens.
9 strikeouts through 3 innings.
And that was probably the best foul ball we've seen so far today.
Called strike 3. As King hits this one deep to left, going back, and that one is gone. There's your exclamation mark from Diana King, 7-0 Rhinebeck.
I actually didn't think it was going to because I felt really under it, but I mean, I guess it just went, so.
That was a very impressive.
Called strike 3.
Anatomy.
Swing and a miss, strike 3. The 0-2. Swing and a miss, strike 3. 2-2. Swing and a miss.
I don't know about you, Kat, but I think the Yankees could use someone like that this year.
I agree with you, Anthony, because, you know. The final beam for the new storage center of longtime Mamaroneck contractors, the Murphy brothers, was put into place last Thursday. Local Live reporter John Schifano has the story.
Murphy Brothers contractors Sean and Chris celebrated the last structural beam being installed on their Mamaroneck self-storage project.
They're leaders, they're visionaries, they're entrepreneurs. They're people who really put their employees and their family first and their community.
The building is energy efficient, making this a green construction project and the only commercial project in the tri-state area to have solar roof shingles.
As I had said, this is a 40,000 square foot green building that we're building here. We're using solar shingles, foam insulation. Just a little bit of history. This used to be a lumber yard when we were kids. We lived less than a half a mile from here, and we were kids. We would walk here and buy a pound of nails for our fort at our house when we were little kids. So little did we know that someday we're going to own this facility and build this large self-storage facility.
The company's projects have received both local and national design award recognition.
Congratulations to the Murphy brothers, but also, as I said, on behalf of County Executive Astorino, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Murphy brothers and everybody here who's helped creating jobs to make our community the better place it is.
And forever, I'm going to be driving my grandkids now. We're going to pick Waverly Avenue as a place to go from Larchmont to Mamaroneck. And I'm going to be able to point up and say, see that building? My name is on a girder up on the top of that building.
With a little bit of history, this is a very proud project for all who were involved. For the Local Live, I'm John Schifano, signing off.
For our Spotlight segment, we have a feature on a new restaurant, Massa Coastal Italian Cuisine. It is located on Boston Post Road in Mamaroneck and known for providing delicious Italian cuisine for families big and small. Reporter Christian Sokoli has the dish.
I'm standing here in Massa Coastal Italian Cuisine, a new restaurant in the center of the village of Mamaroneck. Let's see what their food is like. Growing up in Salento, Italy, executive chef and owner of Massa Coastal Italian Cuisine, Francesco Colli, brings his heritage to Mamaroneck.
I grew up by the water. This cuisine is very close to who I am and what my heritage and my culture is.
So what makes Massa unique?
Our cuisine specializes in fresh fish flown from all over the world. We have direct contact with all the fisheries. Not only do we have the freshest fish available at market, but we also make our own homemade pastas, which is made daily and prepared with seasonal items.
And for the most seasoned foodies, Chef Francesco offers customized dishes.
The customer can have different type of preferences and maybe customize their own fish sauces, or simply grilled with a piece of lemon and our extra virgin olive oil.
So if you love fresh fish and pasta daily, Massa Coastal Italian Cuisine is the place for you. For the Local Live, I'm Christian Sokole.
Our pet of the week is Remy. He is an 8-month-old American Pit Bull Terrier. He is super lovely and is looking for a new home. So if you would like to meet and adopt him, contact the New Rochelle Humane Society at newrochellehumanesociety.org.
Now, isn't he cute? That's it for this edition of The Local Live. For more information on the stories you just saw, visit our website at lmctv.org. As always, any concerns, comments, or questions can be emailed to us at thelocallive@lmctv.org. I'm Kat Galliano. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Anthony Carlo. Welcome, Kat, to the show. It was
Thank
great
you.
doing our first broadcast together.
It was a blast.
We hope to see you next week on another episode of The Local Live.
Tell us what you think. In person, over the phone, online. Watch and hear yourself on TV. You tell us, we air it. This is The Local Live.